The weather was perfect, sunny, but not scorching, with a soft breeze drifting through the open gardens of the lakeside estate, where Emily had dreamed of getting married since she was 16. White chairs had been carefully lined up along the trimmed lawn, facing a floral arch that now stood empty after the ceremony. Inside the venue hall, the air was filled with soft laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the music of a jazz quartet playing on a small stage near the dance floor. It was Emily's wedding reception, and up until a few minutes ago, everything had gone exactly as planned. She had married Jacob, her college sweetheart, her partner through grief, growth, and grad school. They had planned the wedding together, down to the napkin colors and reception playlist. Every detail had been touched by love. It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. And for most of the day, it was, until her older sister Rachel stood up during the toasts. Rachel had always been a complex presence in Emily's life. Just 18 months older, she had oscillated between protective and patronizing, warm and distant, kind and cutting. As kids, they had played together, but Rachel had always found subtle ways to assert dominance. Who got the bigger slice of cake? Who got to pick the TV show? Who their mother listened to more attentively? Emily learned early on to avoid confrontation, to smooth things over. She had never wanted to believe Rachel's resentment ran deep. So when Rachel stood up, champagne flute in hand, and gave a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, Emily felt a ripple of unease. "I just want to say a few words about my baby sister," Rachel began, with that theatrical tone she often used when she wanted attention. "You've always been the golden girl, Em. Always the sweet one. The good one. The one who made Mom and Dad proud without even trying." The guests laughed awkwardly. Emily felt her stomach tighten. This wasn't how the other toasts had gone. "But you know, growing up with you wasn't always easy," Rachel continued, swaying slightly, emboldened by the wine. "Because even though you were so perfect, there was always this little secret no one talked about." Jacob, seated beside Emily, leaned closer. "Is she okay?" Emily forced a smile. "She's being dramatic. It's just her way." Rachel held her glass higher. "Well, since it's your big day and all, maybe it's finally time to spill the tea." Her voice rose. "Everyone, did you know Emily is adopted?" A beat of silence followed. Just a beat. And then gasps. Audible ones. Whispering. Chairs shifted. Someone dropped a fork. Emily's face froze. Her heart thudded against her ribs like a war drum. The blood drained from her face so fast she felt dizzy. She stared at Rachel, who grinned as though she delivered the punchline to a perfectly timed joke. "What?" Emily said quietly, but Rachel ignored her. "She didn't know?" Someone at the back whispered. Rachel continued, undeterred. "It's true. Found out a while ago. Guess our parents didn't get around to telling her." Emily stood slowly, her hands gripping the edge of the table to steady herself. Her father's face was buried in his hands. Her mother looked like she had seen a ghost. The music had stopped. The quartet had gone silent. Emily glanced around the room. Guests were staring. Her old college roommate, her boss from the art gallery, her in-laws. Even the caterer stood frozen at the back, holding a tray of mini quiches. Jacob touched her hand. "Do you want me to say something?" She shook her head. Rachel finally sat down, sipping her drink like nothing had happened. She didn't look regretful. She looked smug. The MC, clearly unsure how to proceed, tapped the microphone. Thank you for that heartfelt message, Rachel. Up next we have..." But the moment was broken. The celebration had cracked in half. Emily stepped out of hall and into the garden, sucking in the cool air. She felt humiliated, confused, and betrayed all at once. Her wedding dress, so carefully chosen, suddenly felt too tight. Her earrings itched. Her heels dug into the grass as she walked away from the venue and toward the small gazebo by the lake. She needed space. She needed to breathe. She needed to cry, but couldn't. Not yet. Her emotions were locked somewhere behind a shock. She heard footsteps behind her. "Jacob." "Emily," he said gently. "What the hell just happened?" "I don't know," she whispered. "I really don't know. Do you? Is it true?" She turned to look at him, eyes wide. "Of course not. I mean, if it is, I didn't know. I never had any reason to think I wasn't their daughter. I look like my mom." Jacob didn't answer. He just wrapped his arms around her, pulling her in close. She buried her face in his shoulder. Behind them, the murmur from the hall grew louder. Guess we're talking. The gossip had taken root. Emily pulled away. I can go back in there. We can leave, Jacob said. No. If I leave, she wins. Jacob hesitated. What are you going to do? Emily's eyes narrowed. I don't know yet, but I know something she doesn't. He tilted his head. What? I know that I'm not the one with secrets. Her voice was low, steady. It was the only certainty she had in that moment. Because a few weeks earlier, while organizing some of her parents' documents for the wedding paperwork, she'd found something strange, something about Rachel. She hadn't told anyone. Not yet. It had seemed too unbelievable, too big. But now, she realized why Rachel had tried to turn the spotlight. It was projection. It had always been projection. Emily took Jacob's hand and walked back toward the reception. If her sister wanted to drag skeletons out of closets, then she should have been more careful about her own. The day after the wedding, Emily sat cross-legged on the floor of her old childhood bedroom, surrounded by the wreckage of the night before. Her wedding dress was stuffed into its garment bag and hanging awkwardly on the closet door. Her bouquet lay wilted in a vase on the windowsill, a few petals fallen onto the floor like forgotten memories. She hadn't touched her phone in hours, not since waking up to a barrage of missed calls and messages ranging from condolences to nosy curiosity. She didn't reply to any of them. The house was silent. Her parents were downstairs, too ashamed to speak, too afraid to explain. And Rachel? She had left the reception early after the fallout, leaving behind nothing but questions and an eerie sense of finality. Emily wasn't crying. She'd already passed through that stage on the car ride home. What she felt now was colder, an eerie calm that came not from peace but from clarity. The humiliation she had experienced didn't come out of nowhere. It had been building, brewing beneath the surface of her relationship with Rachel for years, like a slow-burning fuse. And now it had exploded. But what Rachel didn't know was that Emily had been keeping her own secrets, too. 3 weeks before the wedding, Emily had taken a day off work to visit her parents and dig out some old family documents for the marriage license application. She had planned to find her birth certificate, scan it, and leave. Simple. But when she entered the dusty attic, things didn't go according to plan. Boxes were everywhere, mismatched, half-labeled, old and musty. The attic smelled like old books and insulation as she sneezed as she pulled down the lid of a large bin marked Emily/school stuff. She rifled through the bin, but didn't find the certificate. Instead, she found an old photo album. Curiosity nudged her. She opened it. Page after page, she saw photos of herself as a child. Birthday parties, ballet recitals, Christmas mornings. But something felt off. She noticed Rachel in the earliest photos. Newborn pictures, hospital tags, baby footprints. But for Emily, the photos only started when she was about 2. There were no hospital photos, no baby shoes, no name tags. It struck her then, not as a fear, but as a strange puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. She dismissed the thought at first. Maybe those photos were just stored elsewhere. Maybe she was overthinking. But something gnawed at her. She couldn't ignore it. Not with the wedding coming up. Not with the emotional pressure that came with starting a new chapter of life. She went to her parents' filing cabinet next. Inside, she found a stack of medical forms. Most were for insurance and tax purposes, but tucked in the middle was a manila envelope marked Rachel, pediatric. She paused. She wasn't snooping exactly. That wasn't her intention. But the thought that had started in the attic had grown roots. And she needed answers. She opened the envelope. Inside were several printouts from a geneticist's office, dated nearly 20 years earlier. Emily's breath caught as she read through the first page. It was a diagnostic summary of a rare blood disorder called hereditary spherocytosis, an inherited condition that caused anemia and required periodic monitoring. The report clearly indicated that the disorder was genetic, passed through a specific gene mutation from parent to child. She froze. Emily didn't have the condition. She donated blood for years. She'd undergone blood tests regularly. She knew her own health history as well as her dental records. She kept reading. Another report showed that Rachel had been tested for genetic links to other family members. It specifically stated, Adoptive parents show no trace of relevant genetic markers. Emily read the sentence 3 times before it sank in. Adoptive. Rachel was adopted. The documents weren't vague. They weren't open to interpretation. They explicitly referenced her parents as adoptive. Emily sat back on her heels, heart thudding. The puzzle pieces fell into place all at once. Rachel's temperamental personality, her need to assert dominance, the occasional jokes she made about not fitting in. All the passive-aggressive remarks about Emily being Mom's real favorite. It wasn't just jealousy. It was something deeper. Rachel must have known the truth all along. But what she couldn't handle was the fact that Emily didn't know, and maybe even more so, that Emily didn't care. Because unlike Rachel, Emily had never doubted her place in the family. She had always felt loved, even in the quiet dysfunction that threaded through their household. Emily didn't know what to do with the information then. She didn't want to hurt anyone. Her parents were older now, more fragile. Her mother had recently started forgetting things, and her father had become prone to emotional outbursts. And Rachel? Rachel would have burned the house down if Emily brought this up. So she kept quiet. But she made copies. She scanned the documents onto a flash drive and saved them in a password-protected folder. She printed one set and hid it in the back of her journal. And then she waited. She hadn't expected to need it. She'd hoped the wedding would bring them together, if only temporarily. Rachel had even helped with the flower arrangements and the seating chart, and for a brief while, Emily believed they were making progress. But now, after what happened at the reception, she realized Rachel's kindness was just the calm before the storm. Emily stood up from the floor and walked over to the desk in the corner of her room. She opened the drawer and pulled out the journal. The documents were still there, folded neatly in the back sleeve. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded them again, rereading the sentences that had haunted her for weeks. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. Then it buzzed again, this time a call from her mother. She picked it up. Emily, her mother said, her voice weak. I don't know what to say. I never wanted you to hear it like that. So it's true? Emily asked flatly. No, it's not true. You're our daughter. You were born in that hospital downtown. I have your birth certificate. I swear to you. Then why did Rachel say it? There was a long pause. Because she found out the truth about herself when she was a teenager. We never told her. We adopted her after her biological parents died. It was a closed adoption, and we didn't think she'd ever find out. But she did. And ever since then, she's been angry. Emily sat down slowly, tears stinging the corners of her eyes. Why didn't you tell me? She whispered. Because it didn't concern you, her mother said gently. And because we hoped, one day, Rachel would forgive us and understand. We wanted to protect both of you. She humiliated me in front of 120 people, Emily said, barely holding her voice steady. I know, her mother said, and I don't have an excuse for that. After the call, Emily stared out the window. She saw a group of kids riding bikes down the quiet suburban street, their laughter echoing faintly in the summer air. And she thought about how fragile identity really was, how one truth could shatter a person's entire sense of belonging. She had every reason to feel vindicated. She had proof. But instead, she just felt tired. She wasn't planning revenge. She wasn't even sure she wanted confrontation. But what she did want was control over the narrative. Rachel had turned Emily's wedding day into a stage. Now, it was time for Emily to take back the microphone. She opened her laptop and inserted the flash drive. The Monday after the wedding felt heavier than most. Emily didn't return to work. She called the gallery director and requested personal leave, citing a family emergency. The woman on the other end of the phone didn't ask for details. Emily knew the gossip had already begun to ripple outward from the reception hall, like a stone thrown into a still pond. Friends, acquaintances, and even strangers were now speculating about her family's private affairs. A scandal at a wedding made for irresistible conversation. But Emily didn't care about the gossip. She cared about the lie. And more importantly, she cared about the truth that had been buried for so long. Buried so deeply that even her parents seemed incapable of unearthing it themselves. By Wednesday, she had made up her mind. She called her mother and said she wanted to host a small dinner that weekend. Just family, Her parents, Rachel and Jacob. No cousins, no neighbors. She needed it to be quiet, controlled, intimate. Her mother hesitated, but eventually agreed, her voice hesitant and aged by shame. I'll ask Rachel to come, she said, but I don't know if she will. She'll come, Emily replied. She won't be able to resist. Emily wasn't wrong. Rachel didn't respond to the invitation until Friday night with a curt text. Fine. I'll be there. Don't expect an apology. Emily stared at the message for a long time before placing her phone face down on the table. She didn't expect an apology, but she did expect accountability. Saturday evening arrived with tense air and long shadows stretching across the table. Emily and Jacob had prepared a simple dinner: roasted chicken, salad, wine. Nothing too formal, nothing too casual, just neutral enough to keep everyone from assuming what was coming. Her parents arrived first. Her father had aged 10 years in a week. He greeted her quietly, kissed her forehead, and handed her a bottle of wine without a word. Her mother gave her a long hug, the kind that said, "I'm sorry," in all the ways words couldn't. Then Rachel walked in. She wore black, too dramatic for a family dinner, but typical of her. Her makeup was flawless, her expression unreadable. She kissed their mother on the cheek and gave Emily a nod so slight it bordered on dismissive. They sat. They ate. The conversation stayed light, on purpose. Rachel made a few barbed comments under her breath, mostly aimed at Jacob, who calmly ignored them. Emily didn't bite. She smiled, poured more wine, and waited. It wasn't until the plates were cleared and dessert had been served that Emily excused herself and returned moments later with her laptop. "I need to show you all something," she said, placing it on the table. "Before anyone leaves." Rachel narrowed her eyes. "What is this? An intervention?" Emily looked at her evenly. "No, it's the truth. Something you should have shared in private. But since you made it public, I will too." Rachel scoffed and leaned back in her chair. "Please, don't make this more dramatic than it already is." Emily clicked open the folder on her desktop. She turned the laptop so it faced the group, then tapped the spacebar. The screen lit up with a scan page from a genetic consultation report. Rachel's name in the upper right corner, the words adoptive parents highlighted in yellow. For a moment, no one spoke. Rachel's wine glass paused halfway to her lips. Then Emily spoke, her voice calm and steady. "This is from your pediatric file. The one Mom kept in the cabinet. The one you clearly didn't think anyone would ever look through. It confirms you were adopted, Rachel. Not me." Rachel's face contorted, not with surprise, but with something closer to rage. "You had no right. No, Emily interruptive. You had no right. You humiliated me in front of everyone I care about. You told a lie to make me feel small, to steal my moment, because you couldn't handle your own story. But it's not mine to carry anymore." Her father put a trembling hand to his mouth. Her mother closed her eyes. Emily continued, "I found the documents weeks ago. I didn't say anything because I thought it wasn't my place. But you forced my hand, and if the only way to make you stop is to show the truth, then so be it." Rachel stood abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor. Her face was pale now. Not angry, wounded. "You don't understand what it's like," she hissed. "Growing up knowing something's off. Feeling like you're just placed into a family. Everyone loves you more. You always belonged." "I belonged because I didn't question it," Emily said. "Because I didn't make it a competition." Rachel's lips trembled. "I didn't want to believe it. I wanted them to tell me I was wrong. I kept looking for proof that I was just imagining things." "And when you found out?" Emily asked. "I hated them," Rachel said, her voice cracking. "I hated that I had to find out from some blood test I took when I was 16. I hated that I wasn't told. I hated you for having what I didn't. So yes, I made you the outsider. It was the only way to survive." The room fell silent. Their mother began to cry, quiet, restrained sobs that she tried to stifle with her napkin. Their father just stared at his lap, his knuckles white against his thighs. "I should have told you," their mother whispered. "I should have told both of you everything." Emily looked at Rachel again, not with anger, but with something that surprised even herself. Empathy. "Rachel," she said gently, "you weren't unwanted. You were chosen. You were brought here because they wanted you. And if you had just told me, I would have supported you. I would have understood. But now, Rachel sat slowly, the fire gone from her posture. Her shoulders sagged. I don't know who I am anymore, she said. That's not true, Jacob said, speaking up for the first time. You just don't know who you were told you were. Now you get to choose who you want to be. Emily glanced at him, grateful. Rachel didn't reply. The rest of the evening passed in silence. No one had an appetite for dessert. Rachel left first, saying nothing, just grabbing her purse and slipping out the door like a shadow. Her parents stayed a little longer. Her mother apologized again and again, though no words felt sufficient. Her father hugged her longer than usual and muttered, I'm sorry I didn't handle things better. When the house was quiet again, Emily shut the laptop and leaned into Jacob's arms. You did the right thing, he said. I don't know, Emily replied. It didn't feel like winning. It just felt sad. Jacob nodded. Because it is. But sad doesn't mean wrong. She rested her head on his chest. For the first time in a week, she felt like herself again. Not the bride everyone whispered about. Not the sister whose identity was thrown into question, but Emily. Whole. Grounded. Real. The past couldn't be rewritten. But the future? That was still hers. The following weeks unfolded like an emotional hangover. The kind where the pain wasn't physical, but a dull ache behind every interaction, every phone call, every memory that passed through Emily's mind uninvited. She wasn't angry anymore, at least not in the traditional sense. What replaced her anger was something more nuanced, a quiet grief for the sisterhood she had always hoped for, but never truly had. The family group chat had gone silent. Her mother sent a few messages, photos of a pie she had baked, a link to an article about inherited traits, a simple thinking of you on a Thursday afternoon. But there were no group replies. Her father remained mute, replying only in person when Emily came over alone. And Rachel had vanished. Her social media accounts were dormant. Her texts went unanswered. At first, Emily thought maybe that was for the best. Distance had always been the one thing that protected them from each other. But then, late one night, while cleaning up the remains of her wedding gifts and storing away thank you cards, she found a crumpled note at the bottom of a decorative basket. It was handwritten in blue ink, the paper soft from being handled. Emily, you were never the enemy. You were just the mirror I didn't want to look into. I'm sorry I broke you to hide my own cracks. She sat with the note for hours. At some point, Jacob walked in, saw her holding it, and said nothing. He just sat beside her, arm wrapped around her shoulders, and waited until she breathed again. A week later, she called Rachel. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. Emily hung up. She didn't leave a message. She didn't need to. If Rachel was going to speak to her, it had to be a choice, not guilt, not obligation, just honesty. Real honesty, the kind neither of them had been allowed to have growing up. Meanwhile, life moved on. The world didn't pause for healing. Emily returned to work at the gallery, quietly. Her co-workers didn't ask about the wedding drama, though she caught a few glances when she passed through the hallway. She kept her responses polite and brief, never bitter, never dramatic. She didn't need pity. She needed purpose. She threw herself into a new exhibit focused on identity. Portraits of people photographed beside childhood photos of themselves. The project felt strangely personal, even though she hadn't planned it that way. She curated the lighting so the contrasts were sharp but beautiful, the frames plain but intentional. And when she stood in front of the final arrangement, she realized why it moved her so deeply. The entire collection was a statement that we change, and yet we don't. That underneath every layer of time and pain, there's still a through line, a self trying to stay intact. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Rachel showed up. Emily had just finished rearranging a misplaced sculpture near the entrance when she heard the door open. Rachel stood in the foyer, hair damp, umbrella dripping onto the mat. She looked thinner, paler, but her eyes held something different this time. Not defiance, not pride, just vulnerability. Emily walked toward her slowly. Hi, Rachel said. Hi. I didn't come here to fight. I didn't expect you to. They stood in silence, the air between them thick but not hostile. Just heavy. I saw the exhibit, Rachel said. Online. The photos. It's beautiful. Thanks, Emily replied. It's about continuity, about seeing yourself across time. Rachel looked down. I haven't been able to do that in a long time. I know. More silence. Then Rachel stepped forward. I'm not good at apologies. You know that. Emily gave a faint smile. You're not good at most emotionally responsible things. Rachel laughed, softly, sincerely. Fair. But I meant what I wrote in that note. You really were the mirror. And I hated you for being whole while I felt like fragments. I wasn't whole, Emily said quietly. I just learned to hide the broken parts. Rachel's voice cracked. I don't want to keep living in resentment. I'm tired. So am I. Rachel nodded. Can we start again? Or at least start from here? Emily hesitated. Then she reached out and took her sister's hand. Not again. Just forward. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a step. From there, their relationship began to rebuild. Not with grand gestures or emotional outpourings, but with small, intentional acts. A text once a week. A coffee date that didn't end in tension. A shared playlist they started curating together. Songs that reminded them of road trips, of fights, of healing. Their parents, too, began to thaw. After so many years of silence and secrets, they finally sat down with both daughters and talked. Really talked. About the decision to adopt. About the guilt. About the fear of losing Rachel. About the impossible balance between protecting and deceiving. It didn't fix everything, but it opened the door. Emily learned that healing isn't symmetrical. It doesn't come all at once, or for everyone equally. Her relationship with her father remained distant, polite, but strained. Her mother tried too hard sometimes, overcompensating with gifts and uninvited advice. But Emily no longer expected perfection. She no longer needed it. She found her peace in the spaces she could control. Her work, her home, her new marriage with Jacob. They took a delayed honeymoon to the coast of Maine, where they stayed in a small cottage and cooked dinner together every night. No schedules, no drama, just each other. On their last morning there, as they watched the fog roll over the ocean, Jacob turned to her. You're stronger than you know, he said. I don't always feel it. That's the point. You don't have to feel it to be it. She leaned against his shoulder and watched the waves. When they returned home, a letter was waiting in the mailbox. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a photograph, two young girls, one holding the other in her lap. Rachel and Emily, ages 5 and 3. Emily had never seen it before. On the back, in Rachel's handwriting, were 3 words. We were sisters. Emily tucked the photo into the last page of her journal. The same journal where she had once hidden the medical reports that started it all. And with that, she closed it. She didn't forget. She didn't erase. But she no longer carried the weight like a weapon. She carried it like a story. Hers, and hers alone to tell.